Snow fell on Christmas Eve like silent judgment. William Mercer stood at the frost-covered window, his weathered hand pressed against cold glass. Below, the railroad town glowed with lamplight and life. Families hurried home through the storm, children laughing, packages bundled in arms. Behind him, the mansion echoed with emptiness. A single place setting waited at the enormous dining table. Silver gleamed against white linen. One plate, one glass, one chair pulled back in expectation of no one. The servants moved like ghosts through the halls. They knew better than to speak. William preferred silence now. 3 years of it. 3 Christmases alone in this vast house on the hill. His wife's portrait watched from above the fireplace. Margaret. Her smile frozen in oil and canvas, forever warm while his heart had grown cold as the winter outside. The clock ticked. 6 strikes echoed through empty rooms. William turned from the window. The town below celebrated what he had lost. His children grown and scattered Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, too busy for an old man's Christmas, too distant to remember what family once meant. He had built an empire. The railroads that connected territories bore his name. The prosperity that filled the valley below came from his vision, his sweat, his sacrifice. But success meant nothing when eaten alone. Margaret used to fill these rooms with laughter. Their children had run through these halls, voices bright with joy. Now only portraits remained. Memories haunted him more than any ghost could. William poured brandy from the crystal decanter. The amber liquid caught firelight, glowing like false warmth. He raised the glass toward his wife's portrait in silent toast. "Another Christmas," he whispered to the empty room. The words fell dead in the silence. Outside, the storm thickened. Snow piled against windowsills. Wind howled around the corners of his mansion like wolves circling prey. The town below grew dim as families settled inside warm homes. William was king of this hill, master of this house, alone in his kingdom. He had chosen this. After Margaret died, he pushed everyone away. Easier to feel nothing than to risk more loss. Safer to build walls than bridges. His children had tried at first. Cards, visits, worried letters. But grief made him cruel. Distance made him cold. Now the distance was complete. The clock struck 6:30. Dinner would be served soon. The same meal he ate every night. The same silence. The same empty chair across from him where Margaret once sat. William turned back to the window one last time. Darkness fell completely now. The town lights blurred through falling snow. Somewhere down there, families gathered. Children opened early gifts. Laughter filled small houses with more warmth than his mansion had ever known. He let the curtain fall. "Another Christmas," he said again. The clock ticked its agreement. Time passed whether he lived or merely existed, and William Mercer had stopped living 3 years ago. The knock came at 6:45, shattering the silence like breaking glass. William paused halfway to the dining room. His butler had already retired for the evening. The servants knew not to disturb him on Christmas Eve. The knock came again, urgent, desperate. William crossed the entrance hall. Through the frosted window beside the door, he saw shapes in the swirling snow, multiple figures, small ones. He opened the door. Cold wind rushed inside, bringing snow and the scent of winter. A woman stood on his threshold, 3 children pressed against her skirts. Her coat was thin, patched at the elbows. The children shivered violently despite being huddled together. "Forgive the intrusion," the woman said. Her voice was steady despite the trembling. "My name is Eleanor Hayes. These are my children." She gestured to the 3 small faces peering up at him. 2 boys and a girl, their noses red from cold, their eyes wide with exhaustion and something else. Hope, perhaps, or merely desperation. "I wouldn't ask if there was anywhere else," Eleanor continued. "The mining camp collapsed. My husband died 8 months ago. We've been traveling, looking for work, for shelter. Someone in town said the railroad man lived up here. The oldest boy, maybe 9, stood protectively beside his mother. The girl, younger, clutched a small cloth doll. The youngest, barely more than a baby, stared at William with innocent trust that pierced deeper than the cold wind. William should send them away. To the church, to the boarding house, anywhere but here. But the children's eyes reminded him of grandchildren he barely knew. Just for Christmas dinner, William heard himself say, "Just tonight." Eleanor's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you so much, Mr. Mercer, William Mercer." "Thank you, Mr. Mercer." The title felt wrong without its period, but his throat was too tight to correct her. William stepped aside. The woman hesitated only a moment before crossing the threshold. The children followed, clustered together like small birds seeking shelter from the storm. As they entered, William noticed their worn shoes leaving wet prints on his marble floor. The oldest boy's coat had holes at the cuffs. The girl's dress had been mended multiple times. The youngest wore clothes too thin for Montana winter. Eleanor turned to face him, snow melting in her dark hair. "We won't be any trouble. Just a warm meal. Perhaps a place to sleep out of the storm. We'll leave first thing tomorrow." William closed the door against the wind. The sound echoed through the entrance hall. Final. Committed. He had invited strangers into his carefully maintained isolation. Strangers who needed him. Children who looked at him like he might be salvation. "Mary!" he called. His housekeeper appeared from the kitchen, eyes widening at the sight of guests. "Prepare rooms for Mrs. Hayes and her children. Find warm clothes. Set places for dinner." "Yes, Mr. Mercer," Mary said, already moving. The old woman's face showed surprise, but no judgment. Perhaps she was relieved to see life return to this house, even for one night. The youngest child, the boy with the trusting eyes, tugged his mother's sleeve. "Mama, is this really his house?" His voice was small but clear in the vast entrance hall. Eleanor smoothed his hair. "Yes, Benjamin. Mr. Mercer is being very kind." "For tonight," William said, more sharply than intended. "It's yours for tonight." But even as he spoke the words, something shifted inside his chest. A crack in ice 3 years frozen. Dinner was awkward at first. The children sat stiffly at the long table, overwhelmed by silver and crystal they had likely never seen. Eleanor kept her back straight, her composure intact despite everything. Soup steamed in fine china bowls. Fresh bread, butter, roasted chicken food enough for 10 people, served to 5. William watched from the head of the table. The children ate carefully, their mother having taught them manners despite their circumstances. The oldest boy, Thomas. Eleanor had called him, glanced at William with wariness. The girl, Sarah, said nothing but observed everything with sharp, intelligent eyes. Benjamin, the youngest, spoke with the honesty only children possess. "This is the biggest house in the whole world," he whispered to his mother. "Eat your soup, Benjamin," Eleanor said gently, but William caught himself almost smiling. After dinner, Mary showed them to the guest rooms. William listened from his study as the housekeeper's voice echoed down the hall, showing Eleanor where everything was, promising hot water for baths. "The children's room has a fireplace," Mary said. "I've laid out fresh night clothes. They're from when Mr. Mercer's children were young. They'll be too big, but they're warm." "You're very kind," Eleanor replied. "All of you are." William sat in his leather chair, brandy untouched on the side table. He could hear movement above feet on floorboards, water running, muffled voices. The house making sounds it hadn't made in 3 years. Living sounds, family sounds. An hour later, he found himself walking down the upstairs hall. He didn't plan to. His feet simply carried him there. The children's door stood slightly ajar. Lamplight spilled into the hallway. William paused. Unseen in the shadows, Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, tucking blankets around 3 small bodies. All 3 children were clean now, wearing his son's old nightshirts. Their faces glowed in the firelight. Peaceful and safe, for perhaps the first time in months. "Are we really staying until Christmas?" Sarah asked quietly. "Yes, sweetheart. Mr. Mercer has been very generous. And then we leave." Thomas's voice held resignation too old for his age. Eleanor smoothed his hair. "We'll figure it out. We always do." Benjamin yawned. "I like it here. It's warm." "I know, my love. Sleep now." Eleanor began humming. A lullaby, soft and low. The children's eyes drifted closed. The fire crackled. Snow tapped against the window like gentle fingers. William stood frozen in the doorway. He had forgotten this. The sound of children settling for sleep, the quiet peace of bedtime, the way a mother's voice could make everything feel safe. Margaret used to sing to their children exactly like this. Eleanor turned suddenly, sensing his presence. Their eyes met across the dim room. She didn't speak. Neither did he. But understanding passed between them, two people who knew loss, who understood what it meant to keep moving when everything inside wanted to stop. William retreated to his study. He poured brandy but didn't drink it. Instead, he sat listening to the sounds of his house. Distant voices above, the creak of a bed, the housekeeper moving through the kitchen, the fire settling in the drawing room. His mansion was breathing again. Outside, snow continued falling. The storm would last through the night, perhaps into tomorrow. They would have to stay. He would have to endure their presence for another day, maybe two. The thought should have troubled him. Instead, something in his chest loosened, something that had been clenched tight for 3 years. William stood and walked to the doorway of his study, down the hall. Lamplight glowed under doors. Above, he heard a child laugh softly at something. Then Eleanor's gentle shush. For tonight. His house was not empty. For tonight. He was not alone. Tomorrow they would leave. He would return to his silence. Everything would go back to the way it was. But tonight, just tonight, William Mercer let himself remember what it felt like when this house was a home. Christmas morning came bright and cold. William woke to sounds he hadn't heard in years, children's voices, footsteps running, laughter echoing through halls. He found them after breakfast, exploring the mansion like cautious adventurers. Thomas stood in the study doorway, staring at the maps on William's walls. Railroad lines crisscrossed territories, marking the empire William had built. "Did you really make all these?" Thomas asked when he noticed William watching. "With my own hands once. Now I just planned them." "Why did you stop?" The question was innocent. The answer complicated. "I got older," William said, "and there were other things to do." But that was a lie. He had stopped because Margaret died, because work became his escape from grief, because planning railroads was easier than facing an empty house. Thomas traced a line on the map with one finger. "My pa worked in mines. He said railroads brought everything, jobs, towns, families. They connect people," William said quietly. "That's what they're supposed to do." The irony wasn't lost on him. He built connections for others while severing his own. Sarah appeared in the doorway, drawn by voices. Her eyes went to the bookshelves lining the walls, floor to ceiling. She moved toward them like iron to magnet. "Do you like to read?" William asked. Sarah nodded, too shy to speak. She touched the leather spines reverently, her fingers lingering on titles she couldn't quite decipher. "Would you like to learn more?" William heard himself offer. Her eyes went wide. "Yes, sir." "Then pick one, anyone you like." Sarah's hand hovered over several before selecting a worn copy of fairy tales. She held it like treasure. Benjamin appeared last, toddling through the door with his mother close behind. The boy carried something a wooden train, painted red and blue, wheels still turning smoothly despite years in storage. William's breath caught. His son's toy. From 30 years ago, he'd forgotten it existed. "Found it in the hall closet," Eleanor said apologetically. "I'm sorry. He shouldn't have." It's fine, William interrupted. His voice came out rough. It's just a toy. It should be played with. Benjamin sat on the floor, pushing the train in careful circles, making soft chuffing sounds. Lost in the simple joy only children know, William knelt beside him. The movement surprised everyone, including himself. His knees protested, but he ignored them. Watch, William said, winding the key on the train's side. It does this. He released it. The train rolled forward on its own, wheels clicking rhythmically. Benjamin's delighted laugh filled the study. For the first time in 3 years, William laughed with him. Eleanor watched from the doorway, her hand over her mouth. Thomas and Sarah moved closer, drawn by the sound of joy in this house that had forgotten how to hold it. They spent the morning like that, William showing Thomas how railroads were planned, explaining how each line connected territories, brought prosperity, built futures. Sarah curled in a chair, sounding out words in her fairy tale book. Benjamin playing with the train, making it go around and around while William wound it again and again. Mary appeared in the doorway, eyes bright with unshed tears. She hadn't seen her employer smile since his wife died. Now he sat on the floor with a child, playing with a toy train, looking more alive than he had in 3 years. By midday, the mansion felt different. Not empty, not silent, filled with voices and movement and the particular energy children bring to any space. William stood at his study window, watching snow fall over his town. The same view as yesterday. But today it looked different. Behind him, Benjamin laughed again. Thomas asked another question about railroads. Sarah turned a page carefully, her lips moving as she read. Eleanor stood beside William suddenly. He hadn't heard her approach. Thank you, she said quietly, for this morning, for letting them be children. They're good children. They are, despite everything. She paused. Your own children, do they come for Christmas? The question hurt more than it should. They're busy. Boston, Chicago, San Francisco. They have their own lives. But they're still yours. Distance isn't just measured in miles, William said. Eleanor looked at him with those understanding eyes. No, I suppose it isn't. They stood in silence, watching snow fall. Behind them, children played in a house that had forgotten what children sounded like, and William Mercer felt something dangerous growing in his chest. Hope. Christmas afternoon settled over the house like a quilt warm, comfortable, deceptively safe. William sat with Eleanor in the drawing room while the children napped upstairs. Coffee steamed between them. The fire crackled. Outside, snow continued its relentless fall. Tell me about your husband, William said. Eleanor's hands tightened around her cup. John was a good man. Strong, kind. He believed in hard work and family. She paused. The mind collapse was sudden. One moment he was there. The next, she didn't finish. Didn't need to. William understood how death could steal someone mid-sentence, mid-life, mid-everything. 3 years for me, he offered. My wife Margaret, her heart gave out. The doctor said it was quick. Painless. He stared into his coffee. That's supposed to be a comfort. It isn't. No. Eleanor agreed softly. It isn't. Silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable. The silence of two people who understood grief's particular language. Your children keep you living, William said finally. What keeps me living? The question came out before he could stop it. Raw. Honest. Dangerous. Eleanor looked at him with those eyes that saw too much. I don't know. Mr. Mercer. What does... William had no answer. For 3 years. He hadn't been living. Just existing. Moving through days because time passed whether he participated or not. You should start thinking about where you'll go, he said, retreating into practicality. After New Year's? After you leave. Eleanor's expression shifted. Understanding mixed with something else. Hurt. Maybe. Or disappointment. You mean after we leave your home? Yes, after. I see. She set down her coffee cup carefully. Too carefully. The kind of precise movement people make when fighting emotion. We'll figure something out, Eleanor said. We always do. But her voice carried weight now. The weight of a woman who had figured things out too many times. Who was tired of being strong. Who needed, just once, for someone else to say stay. William wanted to say it. The word pressed against his teeth. Stay. Simple. Honest. Terrifying. He said nothing. Footsteps on the stairs broke the tension. Benjamin appeared, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Mama saw Eleanor's face transformed instantly. Yes, my love. Can we stay for New Year's, please? The question hung in the air like smoke. Benjamin looked between his mother and William with innocent hope. He didn't understand adult fear. Didn't know that sometimes people pulled away exactly when they wanted to hold on. We'll see, William said, his voice colder than intended. Benjamin's face fell. Just slightly. Just enough to break something inside William's chest. Eleanor stood quickly. Come. Benjamin, let's see if your brother and sister are awake. She led her son away without looking back. William heard their footsteps fade down the hall. Heard Eleanor's soft voice comforting Benjamin with words William couldn't quite make out. He sat alone in the drawing room. The fire burned lower. His coffee went cold. Outside. Afternoon dimmed toward evening. Tomorrow was the day after Christmas. Then came the awkward days between Christmas and New Year. Then they would leave. Eleanor would take her children somewhere else. This house would return to silence. Everything would go back to normal. The thought should have brought relief. Instead, it felt like drowning. William stood and walked to his study, closed the door, poured brandy with shaking hands. He was doing the right thing, the safe thing. They were strangers, temporary guests. He had obligations to his business, his routine, his carefully maintained isolation. But in the drawing room, Eleanor's question echoed, "What keeps you living?" And William Mercer still had no answer. The church stood at the center of town, its white steeple piercing gray sky. On the day after Christmas, it held a community gathering, singing, fellowship, shared meals. Eleanor mentioned it at breakfast, carefully, casually. The pastor invited us, she said. He said everyone was welcome. The children would love to see other children. William looked up from his plate. He hadn't been to town in 3 years. Hadn't participated in community life since Margaret's funeral. The thought of entering that church, facing those people, made his chest tight. "I'll take you," he heard himself say. Mary dropped a spoon in the kitchen. Eleanor's eyes widened. The children looked up with sudden excitement. "You don't have to," Eleanor started. "I said I'll take you." And so William Mercer, railroad tycoon and recluse, walked down the hill into town for the first time in 3 years. The church was warm and bright. Candles everywhere. People crowded the pews, their voices rising in hymns that shook the rafters. Children ran between benches, their laughter infectious. Heads turned when William entered. Whispers rippled through the congregation like wind through wheat. "Is that William Mercer? From the big house. Haven't seen him since?" Eleanor walked beside him. Children in tow. She held her head high, ignoring the stares. Or perhaps not ignoring, simply not caring. She had walked through worse than curious eyes. Pastor Richardson came forward, genuine welcome on his weathered face. "William, good to see you." "Pastor, and you must be Mrs. Hayes. Welcome. Please, sit anywhere." The service began before William could reconsider. Hymns he remembered from childhood. Prayers that once brought comfort. The pastor spoke of new beginnings, of grace arriving unexpected, of keeping hearts open even in winter. William tried not to listen, but the words found him anyway. During fellowship, Eleanor was immediately surrounded by churchwomen. They welcomed her warmly, asking about the children, offering help. Within minutes, she was part of something connected, woven into community the way William had never managed. Thomas disappeared with a group of boys his age. Sarah found girls who wanted to see her fairy tale book. Benjamin clung to William's leg for a moment before being coaxed away by a kindly grandmother with cookies. William stood alone near the back. Old railroad workers approached, shaking his hand with respect. "Good to see you, Mr. Mercer. Thank you for the work. Railroads saved this town. You built something that matters." Their words should have meant something. Instead, they felt hollow. He had built railroads but no relationships, created prosperity but no peace. His work connected everyone except himself. Then Benjamin came running. "Mr. William." The boy grabbed his hand with sticky fingers, tugged insistently. William resisted briefly before letting himself be pulled forward. A group of children gathered around a table where someone had set up a nativity scene, hand-carved figures. Simple, beautiful. Benjamin pointed with excitement, explaining who each figure was with the authority only children possess. "And that's the baby," Benjamin said reverently. He was cold, but they kept him warm. Other children pressed close, including Benjamin in their circle naturally. Thomas appeared with his new friends. Sarah stood with girls who already felt like sisters. They were children being children, belonging without effort, finding family where family existed. William watched them, watched Eleanor across the room, laughing with women who had been strangers an hour ago, watched the pastor greeting each person by name, watched the community that somehow continued without him noticing. Something inside William's chest cracked, not broken open. He had been watching life from his window for 3 years. Today he stood in the middle of it, and it didn't hurt as much as he feared. It hurt differently. The ache of muscles too long unused, the pain of thawing. When the gathering ended, families lingered. The children begged for a few more minutes. Eleanor found William near the door. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for bringing us. They needed this. Maybe we all did." She was right. William had needed this, needed to remember that the world continued, that people still gathered, still sang, still found joy despite everything, that he could be part of it if he chose. The walk home was different. The children chattered about new friends. Eleanor walked beside William in comfortable silence. The hill didn't seem as steep. The mansion didn't seem as isolated. But when they reached the door, reality returned. Eleanor and her children were temporary. This connection was borrowed. In a few days, they would leave. William would return to his solitude. The house would be empty again. The town would forget he had come. Everything would return to the way it was. William closed the door behind them, shutting out the cold. But he couldn't shut out the feeling that something had changed. Something he didn't know how to name. Something that felt dangerously like hope. 3 days until New Year's. 3 days until they left. William tried not to count. Failed. He took Thomas to the railroad office, showed him maps, explained how routes were planned, introduced him to engineers who remembered when William still worked with his hands. Thomas listened with an intensity that reminded William of his younger self, hungry for knowledge, eager to build something that mattered. "Could I work on railroads?" Thomas asked. "If you study, learn mathematics, engineering, work hard, I will." Thomas promised with the certainty only children possess. William arranged for Sarah to visit the schoolhouse. The teacher, Miss Peterson, was young and idealistic. Her eyes lit up when Sarah read haltingly from the fairy tale book. "She's smart," Miss Peterson said. "She could do wonderful things with proper education." "See that she gets it," William replied, though he didn't explain how. Didn't mention they were leaving. He invited Pastor Richardson for dinner, the first guest in his home since Margaret's funeral. Mary nearly wept with relief. Eleanor helped prepare the meal, moving through the kitchen like she belonged there. The dinner was good, the conversation better. The pastor spoke of community needs repairs to the church roof, families struggling through winter, children needing school supplies. William listened and wrote a check larger than necessary. "You've always been generous," the pastor said. "Money is easy. Showing up is harder." The pastor's eyes held understanding. "But you're here now. That's what matters." After he left, Eleanor and William sat in the study. The children slept upstairs. The house settled into nighttime quiet. Coffee steamed between them. This had become their routine, these evening conversations after children were in bed. Partners in caregiving, if only temporarily. "You're good with them," Eleanor said. "With children. You must miss your own." William stared into his cup. "I pushed them away after Margaret died. I couldn't. I wasn't who they needed. You could write to them and say that their father finally remembered how to be human. Say that you'd like them to visit, that you're sorry, that family matters." Her voice held no judgment, only quiet truth. "They have lives," William said, "children of their own. They don't need an old man's regrets. Everyone needs to know they're wanted." The words hit harder than she meant them to. Wanted. What a simple, terrible thing. To be wanted. To know someone chose you. To belong. "You should finalize your plans," William said, changing the subject. "For after New Year's, where you'll go." Eleanor set down her cup. "We can't stay forever." "No." Even though she didn't finish, didn't need to, even though the children were happy, even though the house felt alive, even though something unspoken grew between them, not romance, but connection, partnership, the possibility of family not bound by blood. "I should check on the children," Eleanor said. Standing, she left William alone in his study. The fire burned low. His coffee went cold. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Inside, the house breathed with the presence of others. But for how much longer New Year's approached like a deadline, like a judgment, like an ending William had thought he wanted, but now dreaded. He heard Eleanor's footsteps overhead, heard her gentle voice checking each child, heard the particular silence that meant everyone was settling for sleep. Soon he would hear that silence all the time, the permanent silence of an empty house, the isolation he had chosen and maintained and wrapped around himself like armor. It would be safer that way. Easier. He wouldn't risk loving and losing again. Wouldn't open himself to the devastation of caring for people who could be taken away. But safety felt different now, less like protection and more like prison. William stood and walked to the doorway of his study, down the hall. Lamplight glowed under Eleanor's door. Above, the children slept soundly in a house that was warm and safe and temporary. 3 days until they left. 3 days to protect himself from feeling more than he already did. 3 days to return to the numbness that had sustained him for 3 years. Or 3 days to find the courage to ask them to stay. William stood in his doorway and didn't know which choice would destroy him faster, letting them go or begging them to remain. The clock struck 9. Time passed whether he was ready or not. And William Mercer was running out of time. New Year's Eve morning arrived cold and bright. William found Eleanor in the guest room, packing, not actively, just preparing, folding clothes that had been washed and mended by Mary, organizing their few belongings into the worn bag they'd arrived with, getting ready to leave. William stood in the doorway watching, his throat tight, his chest aching in a way that had nothing to do with age. She sensed him there and turned. Their eyes met across the space of the room. Everything and nothing passed between them. Understanding. Regret. the weight of words unspoken. "Eleanor," William said. "Yes." His voice came out rough. Years of silence made speech difficult. "Don't go." The words fell into the room like stones into still water, creating ripples that would spread and spread. Eleanor's hand stilled on the fabric she'd been folding. "William, I know I have no right. I know you need to build your own life. But these children," his voice cracked, "they've given me back my life. They're not yours to keep. But they could be." William stepped into the room. Not close, just closer. "And you've shown me I can live again. That this house can be more than a tomb. That I don't have to spend every day waiting to die." Eleanor's eyes shimmered. "We're strangers. Not anymore." Silence stretched. Honest and raw and terrifying. "When my wife died, I died too," William said. "I pushed my children away rather than risk more loss. I built walls and called it protection. But it was just fear. 3 years of fear disguised as grief." "I understand fear," Eleanor whispered. "Then understand this. I'm more afraid of watching you leave than I am of asking you to stay." William's hands shook. "Stay. Not as charity, not as obligation, as family." "William, I have this enormous house and no one to fill it. You need a home. The children need stability, education, a future. I need—" His voice broke completely. "I need a reason to keep living. You've given me that. Please don't take it away." Eleanor turned to face him fully. Tears tracked down her cheeks. "Are you certain? More certain than I've been of anything in 3 years." The moment stretched, fragile. Everything balanced on her answer. "Then—" Eleanor's voice trembled. "Yes. We'll stay." The words were simple, but they changed everything. Footsteps thundered in the hallway. William turned to see 3 children clustered in the doorway. Benjamin in front, Thomas and Sarah behind, their eyes wide, listening, hoping. "Did you mean it?" Benjamin asked, voice small. "Can we really stay?" William knelt despite his protesting knees, met the boy's eyes at his level. "If that's what you want." Benjamin launched himself forward. Small arms wrapped around William's neck with the unrestrained affection only children possess. Thomas and Sarah followed more cautiously. But when William opened his arms, they came. 4 people holding each other in the middle of a guest room. Eleanor standing apart, watching, her hand over her mouth, tears falling freely now. William looked up at her over the children's heads, held out his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she took it, joined the circle, made it complete. This was family, not the one William had lost, not the one he'd imagined rebuilding. Something new, something chosen, something earned through courage rather than inherited through blood. "Well, write to my children," William said, voice muffled against Benjamin's hair. "Invite them to visit. You'll meet your new brothers and sister." Thomas pulled back slightly. "Really? Really? And we can stay forever?" Sarah whispered. "Forever." William promised. Benjamin squeezed tighter. "I knew you were good. I knew it." Children's faith, terrifying and beautiful. Benjamin had trusted him from the first moment, had seen past the walls to something William had forgotten existed, his own capacity for love. His own need for connection, his own unfinished story. They stayed like that until tears dried and breathing steadied, until the fear released its grip and something else took its place. Not happiness exactly. Not yet. But the foundation for it, the possibility, when they finally pulled apart, William felt different. Lighter. Like he'd been carrying weight for 3 years and had finally set it down. Eleanor touched his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." William replied, "For knocking on my door. For giving me a reason to open it. Outside." The town prepared for New Year's celebrations. Inside William Mercer's mansion, a different kind of celebration had already begun. Quieter. More profound. The kind that happened when broken people found each other and decided to build something new from there. Shared pieces. William stood and looked at his new family. A widow with strength enough for two. 3 children who needed what he had to give. A purpose beyond wealth. A future beyond waiting. He had spent 3 Christmases alone. Now he truly knew he would never spend another day alone again. New Year's Day dawned clear and cold. William woke to the sounds of family children's voices, Eleanor's gentle responses, footsteps on stairs, life moving through his house like blood through veins. He dressed carefully, not in his usual solitary routine, but preparing for something. Company. Connection. The beginning of a new year that felt, for the first time in 3 years, worth living. Breakfast was chaotic and wonderful. Benjamin knocked over milk. Sarah helped clean it without being asked. Thomas talked about railroads with the enthusiasm of the newly inspired. Eleanor moved through the kitchen with Mary, the 2 women already developing the shorthand of partnership. "I've written to my children," William announced. Everyone looked up. "I've asked them to visit. Told them about you, about our family." "Our family," Thomas repeated, testing the words. "Yes," William said firmly. "Ours." After breakfast, they prepared for the town's New Year gathering. William hadn't planned to go, but Eleanor suggested it gently, and the children looked hopeful. And William found he wanted to stand with them publicly. Wanted the world to know he had chosen to live again. The town square was crowded. Families gathered in the winter sunshine. Children played in snowbanks. Adults stood in clusters, sharing stories and hopes for the new year. Heads turned when William arrived with Eleanor and the children. More whispers, more curious stares. But this time, William didn't care. Pastor Richardson approached, smiling broadly. "William, Mrs. Hayes, children, Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Pastor, it's good to see you here. Good to see you. Return to us." William understood what he meant. Return to life. Return to community. Return to the world after 3 years of self-imposed exile. "I'd like to introduce my family," William said clearly. Loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Eleanor Hayes and her children Thomas, Sarah, and Benjamin. They'll be living with me. They're family now." The announcement rippled through the crowd. Some surprise, some approval, some calculation about what it meant socially, financially, practically. William didn't care about any of it. He cared that Benjamin grabbed his hand with sticky fingers and held on tight. That Sarah stood close to Eleanor with new confidence. That Thomas looked at the railroad office building with dreams in his eyes. That Eleanor stood beside him with quiet dignity, choosing to build this life with him. The gathering continued. Families shared food. Children played. Adults made resolutions they might or might not keep. William found himself in conversations for the first time in 3 years. Real conversations. About the town. The railroad. The future. He told the school teacher that Sarah would be attending regularly. Told the railroad engineers that Thomas might apprentice when he was older. Promised the pastor he would return to church, that his pew wouldn't stay empty anymore. Each promise was a bridge. Each word a thread weaving him back into the fabric of community he'd torn himself from. As the sun set and families began heading home, William gathered his own family. That phrase still felt strange, but good. Unfamiliar but right. They walked up the hill together. The mansion glowed with lamplight in every window. Mary had lit them all. A beacon where once only one room had been illuminated. A home instead of a mausoleum. Inside, they settled into evening routines that already felt natural. The children changed for bed. Eleanor helped Mary prepare supper. William sat in his study. But this time the door stayed open. Voices drifted in. The house breathed with life. After supper, they gathered in the drawing room, fire burning warm, Sarah reading aloud from her fairy tale book, improving every day. Thomas studying a map William had given him. Benjamin playing with the toy train, content in simple joy. Eleanor sat beside William on the sofa, not touching, but close. Two people who had been alone and now weren't. Two people choosing to build something from grief and grace. "Are you certain?" Eleanor asked quietly. "This is what you want." "More certain every day," William replied. Benjamin looked up from his train. "Mr. William." "Yes. Are you our family now?" William looked at Eleanor. She nodded gently, giving permission, giving blessing. "Yes, Benjamin. We're family now. Forever." "Forever." Sarah set down her book. "You promise?" William's throat tightened, but his voice came out strong. "I promise." They believed him. Children always knew when promises were real. They returned to their activities with the contentment of those who finally belonged. William watched them. His family. Not the one he'd lost, but the one he'd found. Or perhaps the one that had found him when he'd given up looking.